start the last chapter of our conference, the days after. We have the last panel in front of us with 5 speakers. And again, as in the morning, we will combine Czech and English. So please use the interpretation button in your Zoom application, because all the contribution will be translated either into English or to Czech. You saw the instruction image, how to do it. You can see it now. Okay, thank you, Barbara. And the last part is called After. We labeled the previous chapters of the conference Then and Now, and they were dedicated to the history of stagings and interpretation of Karel Čapek's plays RUR and the White Plague. And the Now part was dedicated to current productions, and we had many dramaturgists and directors who provided us with their vision and interpretation of the 2 plays. So that was the previous part of the conference. And now we are in a combined part, because we will speak again a bit about the history of staging of these 2 plays. But we will speak mainly from the viewpoint of set design. So it means we will speak about something what left over after historical productions of these 2 plays. So this will be the topic of the presentations by Mrs. Velemanova, by Libor Vodička, and Mrs. Veronika Ambros. But we will also turn our attention to some future possible productions of these 2 the play The White Plague, because as we announced, there was a special project by the Prague Quadrennial of Set Design and Space dedicated to the White Plague. It's an educational project, and it will be presented by the artistic director of PQ, Markéta Fantova, and Patrick Duvors, curator of this project. So that will be something what will be focused on the future of stagings of these 2 plays of the play The White Plague. So let's start with the first presentation. Já se zase přepojím na český jazyk a vítám tady paní Věru Velemanovou.
Let me cordially welcome Věra Velemanová among us, who will be speaking about the stage design of the White Plague mainly. Věra Velemanová represents the organizer, the Arts and Theatre Institute, and she is a member of the research team of the Department of Czech Theatre. Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation. And let me say more precisely that I will only be speaking on the topic of the White Plague, because Libor Vodička will cover the other performance, the other piece. I will try to share my screen with you. Can you see it now? Yes, we can. Great. Let me try to make it better for you. Very nice, very nice. As for both of the plays written by Karel Čapek, as has been already said, he perceived himself as being in his element in the prose, in writing novels, then rather than writing plays. His literary topics are associated more with the Czech environments of that time. You can see Czech elements there, whereas his plays are um, focused on rather general topics on humanity. When thinking about the topic as given to me related to the White Plague, I realized that 100 years ago, people had a very similar problem related to the Spanish flu. And towards the end of the Great War, their mentality underwent a great change. We can see that in at the works, literary works of the 20th and 30th of the predecessing century, um, focusing on dehumanization, focusing on the technical development. And it was already Charlie Chaplin who addressed this topic in the 20th and 30th. You might actually remember the grotesque creations which were not only grotesque but also very difficult. Let me remind you of Voskovec and Verich, the famous Czech comedians who would also do satirical things in this regard. Karel Čapek and also his contemporaries who addressed such topics, namely Kafka, Franz Kafka, and Jaroslav Hašek, just to mention the few, they warn against dehumanization. And they see this phenomenon in relation to the rise of totalitarian regimes. These things actually which we see around us as well nowadays remind us of Čapek's work, which might nowadays seem somewhat naive or childish, but it gives this, serves as a witness to the difficult times. When working with the text of the White Plague, I encountered one line which I will try to actually quote, and it is Professor Sigelius speaking, quote, Cheng's disease will become pandemic. In China, every year emerges a new unknown disease. This is page 22. the white plague by Čapek. And there is also the topic of sacrifice uh, worked um, on by Čapek, which has not been mentioned yet. Here, the representative of this topic of sacrifice is Dr. Galen in the novel. And Dr. Galen has got a somewhat peculiar origin. He is a Greek from Pergamon. And Dr. Sigelius says, quote, that origin of yours, this character was played by Hugo Haas, an actor, a famous Czech actor of Jewish origin. And Hugo Haas's brother, Pavel Haas, died in the concentration camp. And of course, Hugo Haas and his family who survived were afflicted by it. Hugo Haas was very close to Karel Čapek and Josef Čapek and Olga Scheinflugová. You can see him here. He was a celebrity, and he was also his last part he played was in the National Theatre, and then he was fired in the middle of the play when he was on the stage. Later, he actually emigrated first to France, then to the US, and then he moved to Vienna because he wanted to be closer to home. And it was Karel Dostal who embraced the first rendition of the play. He also acted in the film. You can see him here on this image. He invited colleague, architect and stage designer, Vlastismal Hoffman, who was a leading personality of the modern Czech scenography. And it was from the 1920s when he, through his various approaches, uncovered old decorative and elusive forms, and in doing so, he actually indicated where they should go, that they should not resort to external means to describe the dramatic environment, but that modern forms of architecture and visual arts should be embraced, and that the inner means should be used rather. And there was another name, very important, Karl Hugo Hiller. Hoffman cooperated with Karel Hugo Hiller. He was a representative of expressionistic principles and cubist forms. The stage set actually bears traces of Hoffman's traces of civilism and constructivism, functionalism, but also a certain kind of a hidden and seemingly suppressed trace of expressionism under the seemingly impersonalized horizontal lines. There is somewhat hidden burning volcano matter. the model of the set is in the National Museum, and we can see three main environments changed on the revolving stage, split into three parts, in line with the Chapek's division of the play. We have three titles here, according to the three leading characters. Well, it is Dr. Sigelius, Baron Krog, and the Marshal. In one segment, we can see a large study room of Professor Sigelius, which is horizontally split through or along the lines of white and black stripes. And then it is divided into four white vertical stripes, as you can see on the picture. And in the center, you see this big brown door, which makes the whole model symmetrical. You see on the left-hand side a round table, on the right-hand side an elongated desk. What we see is the functionist, modern trend, and which gives us the sense of luxury. The second segment shows a room with curtains. This is the interior of the flag of the Krog's subordinate, simply called father in the play. There is the Chapek's note saying this is the introductory scene of this act, which brings the family to the lamp. And Hoffmann used the color tones which made the scene gloomy and hopeless. This was his skill, Hoffmann's skill, using color tones for creating special moods. This proves Hoffmann's grounds or roots in Expressionism, regardless of whether he underwent different styles in his career, Cubism, Civilism, or regardless whether he actually used functionalist features. And then there's the third environment. Let me show it to you. This is the picture. This is the exterior outside of the Marshal's palace, where you see the pillars, dark pillars in metal dark tones, gloomy entrance leading into the palace. And this is a staircase in front of which Dr. Galen dies after being trampled to death by the enraged crowd. Then we have site-specific locations, such as the hospital with the lepers, the hallway at the Marshal's place with this big map behind him in the background. This is the map of the world. Hoffmann uses dark background where he draws and paints shapes in white ink and white color. We see the black color, dark gray, dark blue gray. They prevail in his set design. This is very similar to the settings for Shakespeare's Macbeth or the adaptation of Dostoevsky's work. The White Disease premiered in the National Theatre on the 29th of January 1937, and it had 84 repeats. And 1938, it was taken off the repertory. Let me show you some images depicting the set. Here you see Ward 13, where Dr. Galen could treat the lepers and test his cure. This is Zdeněk Štěpánek, an actor impersonating the marshal. It was in December 1937 where the film version premiered, directed by Hugo Haas. He himself actually played Dr. Galen, while the other cast stayed the same. For example, Sigelius was played by Bedřich Karan, the Marshal by Zdeněk Štěpánek, Baron Krog by Václav Vidra, Krog Jr. by Ladislav Boháč, Father by František Smolík. Hugo has preserved the spirit of the play, and although there is a great director of photography, Otto Heller, the film still maintains the theatrical character and pathos, which suits the topic, no matter how much he submitted the whole piece to the film language. Swapped some scenes with the stilted militant speech of Marshall given from the balcony. And here we see again Dying Marshall's speech, this time inviting for peace. This enabled him to make the whole drama more dramatic, more urgent. This dark undertone is very typical of the film version. And Stepan Kopecký, the architect, actually based his stage design on it. Unfortunately, I could not actually find the pictures of the film, but I would like to draw your attention to the floor in Marshall's Place with the pattern reminding remotely but clearly of the Nazi swastika. And the map of the world is not in the Marshal's office, but in the office on Baron Krog. Here you see some of the pictures from the film. Here, this is Baron Krog in the last picture. The white disease is not staged very often in the Czech country, but during the whole second half of the 20th century, it's been more common. Based on the information from the ATI database, there has been 36 productions. The last one was shown on the Zoom platform in November 2020 by artists in the Josef Cajetan Till Theatre in Pilsen. However, all performances reflect upon the time from which the white plague is originating. I have prepared a number of set designs which I would like to share with you. They actually are from the post-war period. Let me show you. You can compare those pictures with the pictures given to you by Mr. Mischowitz, who spoke about the white plague um, by František Pressl and Viktor Schulz in Bratislava, Pressburg, in 1937. And in order to compare things, I wanted to show you what František Pressl produced in 1957 in the former Till Theatre in Prague. It was directed by Salzer, and František Pressl actually worked with some basic architecture, which was a rather of a cubistic style, and then he used a projector. This is to show you how he actually created the environment in front of the surgery of Dr. Galen, where the poor queued in order to be treated by him. This is one of the sets. You might know that František Trester was a follower of Vlastislav Hofmann. However, he actually built on Hofmann's approach and developed it further, similarly to Josef Svoboda, who spoke of Vlastislav Hofmann at his burial and described him as the founding father of modern Czech set design. This you see a very strong, very emotional design set. It was in a time where the authors already knew, were fully aware of the dangers of an authoritarian regime. It was 12 years after the war. Yesterday, Ladislav Vychodil's set design was mentioned. That was the performance in Bratislava, and it was the white disease, as you see, and let me just remind you of it, because then I will speak about another performance for which Ladislav Vychodil in 1968 in the National Theatre produced a new set, and I have to say that all these so far mentioned performances were from a smaller theater. This is a performance directed by Evgen Sokolovsky, or rather authored by Evgen Sokolovsky. You see the costumes. They actually are reminiscent of rather current times. And Ladislav works with very similar elements we mentioned 10 years ago, and that those are the shapes of the globe. However, what we see is that the globe shapes are corroded, and that means that it is the world after, in the aftermath. Dr. Galen was played by Libor Pešek and Baron Krog by Čestmír Žanda. And this is the last picture towards the end. The latest performance, which I would like to mention, is authored by Miroslav Macháček, and Josef Svoboda is the set designer, stage designer. It was in the Stavovské divadlo. It only had 18 repeats, if I'm not wrong, and then it was forbidden. It was virtually impossible to find out why. Some people thought the reason was that Jaroslav Macháček used the text in a too liberal way. Some people criticized Dr. Galen as different Galen, which did not correspond to Čapek's characteristic of Galen. Everyone had an opinion to say, a critical one. A meeting of Czechoslovak playwrights was called, where this performance was discussed, and they very soon took it off the repertoire. They didn't like Miroslav Macháček, they didn't like Josef Kemmer. However, 1990, Josef Kemmer commented on it in a journal issued by the National Theatre, and he actually described it as a bitter experience by him, and he was speaking about a critical claim of the party members. Jiřina Švorcová, an actress and a staunch communist, criticized the performance apparently. Should you be interested in the debate, then you might find some sources in the journal called Scéna from 1990, July, or you can get some more information in the database of the Arts and Theatre Institute. You will be able to follow the discussion between Josef Kemmer and the party member Jiřina Švorcová, commented on our famous historian Jiří Černý. Well, in conclusion, let me say that all these mentioned performances commented somehow on the horrors of the war. The horrors were so great that they actually eclipsed the fear of illnesses. Čapek was very reasonable. He was very, however, he was positive, but he was also a skeptical person. He knew that nothing, no feeling lasts forever. In order to conclude in a rather positive note, I would like to quote from Čapek's play RUR. Life will not perish. Life begins anew. It begins naked and small and comes from love. It takes root in the desert, and all that we have done and built, all our cities and factories, all our great art, all our thoughts and all our philosophies, all this will not pass away. It is only we that we have passed away. Our buildings and machines will fall to ruin. The systems and the names of the great will fall like leaves. But you, love, you flourish in the ruins, sow the seeds of life in the wind. Seen salvation through love, and life will not perish. Thank you. Thank you for this very interesting presentation. And
Now
let
we
us
will advance to
turn
another
our attention to another famous institution, and that is our National Museum, represented by Mr. Vodička from the National Museum's collection relating to Čapek's RUR and the White Plague.
Ale i bílé nemoci možná, nevím, jestli tam, Libore, budeš něco mít, najdeme ve sbírkách Národního muzea.
So Libor will tell us about what can be found in the collections of the National Museum. So my question is, can you see my presentation well? Yes. We should click on play the presentation, then we will see the slide, only the particular one. Try to click on from the beginning. So on top, from the beginning, it's on top on the left side in the bar. Can you see it? So it's on the bar, right? Underneath it says file, and then from the beginning. It should be played from the very beginning. Nothing? That's strange. Now, excellent. We can see it really well. So now I can take a deep breath. So once again, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I prepared a presentation for you. It's a certain interpretation. I would like to introduce to you the set design of stagings of Čapek's play RUR. We agreed on this with my colleague Vera Velemova. We didn't want to talk about the same topic, about the same play. So I will discuss RUR based on the collections of the theater department of the National Museum. I have had the honor to have this department for 4 years, and I'm also the curator of the stage design collection of the National Museum. So I will touch on how Karel Čapek characterized the dramatic space and his set design and inter-dialogue notes. And this was the iconic key for the creators of the direction and also dramaturge interpretation of Čapek's text, and it was also key for the actual set design. As you know from reading Chapek's drama, the space is defined in a very specific way. In the prologue, the characters are situated in the central office of Prossum's Universal Robots factory. On the right side, there's an entrance. There are windows on the front wall, which show an endless row of factory buildings. On the left side, there are other directors' rooms. There's also Duman's office, which is structured as follows. So there's a large American desk, there's a revolving chair, there are various items, phone, there are maps, various ship and railway lines, a calendar, a clock, posters, and so on and so forth. So all of this is described in great detail. So it's a modern equipment. There's a beautiful Turkish carpet. There's a round table, a sofa, also a leather cloth chairs. There's a bookshelf. There's also this bookshelf with bottles of wine and spirits instead of books. There's a cash register and also a Duman's typewriter. In the first act, Helen's salon is described. There's a wallpaper door leading to the music salon on the right side, a door leading to Helena's bedroom, and in the middle there are windows showing the sea and a harbor. There's a vanity mirror, there are various small items, a table, a sofa, and so on and so forth, a chest of drawers. It's very modern and feminine. Helen's salon is part of a factory complex, which is clear from various signs. You can also hear factory pipes and syringes. In the second act, there's also Helen's salon depicted. Helena plays the piano, and there's a scenic note reminding us of a window with a view of the ocean, which is like a field of poppies. We can see the first slide only. You have to move on. I will move it. Yes. The fireplace, light bulb. We know that the fireplace will play an important role because Helena will burn both copies of manuscripts of the old Rotterdam. The third act, one of the experimental laboratories of the factory, when the door in the background opens, there's an endless row of additional laboratories. On the left side, there's a window. On the right side, a door to the autopsy room. We can see a desk with many test tubes, flasks, burner chemicals, a smaller thermostat, and there's a microscope as well with a glass bowl. Now I will move on. So this is a drama space that was characterized like this by the author, and it was the start point for the visualization of the set design space, as we will see in set designs very soon. And the authors actually tried to stick to this original vision of Chapek. Chapek did not define the time as time frame specifically. We just know that several decades passed between Rosen's experimental invention up to the serial implementation, and also that the spirit covers an adult's life. We also know that 10 years passed between Helena's landing on the island and the bloody final part. So there were 10 years in between. But in any case, so we get the idea that the story is taking place sometime in the second half of the 20th century, so in near future. We also get some hints based on the visual key regarding the genre of Chapek's dramatic text. because the author uses the subtitle collective drama on an entry comedy with 3 acts. It seems to be a situation comedy, maybe a parody to romance, and actually the end is also hopeful and optimistic, so it's not a tragedy in Aristotle's sense. Here are also certain genre elements which show in a realistic drama, a grotesque play, and they also refer to morality and utopia. When we look at individual Czech stagings, when we try to see the direction and dramaturgy interpretation of Čapek's drama RUR, we can see 3 tendencies. The first of them, and the most common one, is based on the author's visual idea, which he described, and they serve this vision. So it's abstract, the time is not defined, and it's about a vision of a human civilization's disaster, and then later on humanization of the machine civilization. Then the second possibility, the second tendency is more contemporaneous, civil. It works with the concept of life here and now. So it is linked to the audience's presence. And there is a warning finger raised by Čapek. It shows the tragic possibility of the development of modern technical progress, and it shows the realistic possibilities. And finally, the third tendency, which is based on elements of utopia, dystopia, and it creates actually a different vision of a dystopic future of the humanity's latter days. So in the materials of the theater department, we can find many hints. The oldest set designs are from the staging of director Vojta Novák. The premiere took place on the 21st of January 1921 on the scene, on the stage of the National Theatre. It was the theater debut of the architect Bedřich Feuerstein, who lived in the years 1892-1936. He basically tried to stick to Čapek's stage design notes. He was very consistent in this respect. He was very disciplined, and he just added some expressionistic tones, cubo-futuristic shapes, and so on, which was visible in the furnishing and the overall character of Alquist's laboratory in the last scene. Also, I would like to mention that his friend Jiří Voskovec mentioned the light magic of real glass instruments. Also, the historian of stage design Věra Ptáčková emphasized in her monography on Czech set design of the 20th century that several years prior to the beginning of the Czech theater constructivism, Feuerstein used on the stage real material, glass. He used curves, waves, squares, cylinders, balls, cubes, which serve a certain purpose in the stage design. He also used very extensive tables with mysterious super apparatuses. So when we look at the collection of Feuerstein, we can see front views, but also floor plans of the stage furnishing, factory buildings in the background of the first scene, and so on. There's also a costume design as part of this collection. Costume design for robots, which is based on the period of clothing of common women and workers, and it actually moved towards uniform. There were also numbers on the chest of these dresses. I will try to discuss this in greater detail later on. So without wanting to evaluate this, I would say that the only surviving design of Vladimira Kristin for the staging of Antonin Riedl in the Municipal Theatre of Ostrava can be viewed as epigonic. Vladimir Kristin was a painter, graphic designer in Moravská Ostrova. He was also a member of the group of artists in Brno, also association. He was active in the Association of Artists Manes, and he painted typical motifs of the Ostrava region. He was also a set design artist in Ostrava's theater, in the opera, in Antonín Dvořák's museum, and also Zdeněk Nejedlý's museum. Additional set design collections originate from Vlastislav Hoffman, to stick to a certain chronological line. They are related to the staging of director Josef Kodíček in the Municipal Theatre in Královské Vinohrady. The premiere took place on the 14th of November 1929. This design had a certain expressionistic expression. Robots, costumes were based on the same principles as those of Feuerstein. Maybe they remind us more of outfits or dresses of Spartakiad gymnasts, of sports teams. I'll show you some examples. 10 years later, however, Karol Dostal's staging at the National Theatre. The premiere took place on the 25th of January 1939. It is clear from Hoffman's design that the creators adopted a more civil interpretation in the sense of here and now. The threat is inconspicuous, creeping, as if it was based on solid form. It's a monumental interpretation of the scenic mass, which signals a colossal fall. So there's no lightness, no light perspective of an open world, high sky, or at least a geometrical construction that would suggest space. Everything is characterized by the mass, which is heavy and solid. So the castles and palaces seem to be very monumental, and faster they will also fall later on. So this is typical of the eve of the Second World War as a very topical theme. The only set design for the staging of RUR, which was prepared at the regional theater in Brno, was studied by director Josef Skřivan, and it and Franciszek Muzyka is represented in that. It is a set for the third final act. It's the Alquist's lamp, which is functionalistic. It expresses order and crystal clear purity. In Muzyka's work, the 1930s are very typical by the neo-classicistic feeling of stage harmony. Well, another collection of set design for RUR, which we can find in the theater department of the National Museum, are set designs of Josef Hort. They were probably produced for the theater in Košice. And this set design artist and also theater director later on died in the Terezin ghetto at the end of the war. He mainly designed sets in the 1920s. A certain inspiration by Forstein is clear. The rough aquarels show that also trapezoid windows and rhodocubist furniture. I'm mentioning this possible inspiration because Josef Hurt would normally rather stick to realistic academicism of the end of the 19th century, illusionist painting, and he was also a respected landscape painter. Vladimir Jan Hnízdl is the next set designer. I would like to mention it was for the staging of director Jiří Joska in Kolín Municipal Theatre. The premiere took place on September 20th, 1958. The form of Helena's salon from the first and second act remind us of the Brussels style of the second half of the 1950s and the early 1960s. Once again, the time context is here and now, and this design mainly focuses on furniture and other equipment. We can also see a Picasso portrait on the wall. It's stylized in the form of science fiction, dystopias, also movie interpretation, comic interpretations. It reminded me of Verne's stories like The Steel Town and also some of the movies of Karel Zeman, Invention for Destruction. A similar shift can be seen in the set design of Zbigniew Kolář for the staging of director Miloš Horansky in E.F. Burian Theatre. The premiere took place on February 26, 1965. The individual elements are put together in an eclectic way, and the drawings of a Renaissance polyhistor are dominant. Proportion of human body, the Vitruvian man. This is a certain universal human mystic or humanoid code that travels on a platinum desk through the universe and sends a message to extraterrestrial civilizations. After Gagarin's takeoff to the cosmos, this is a modern imagination, and I believe that it reminds us of a certain threat to the human civilization. 5 minutes after 12. We can also see a certain tendency towards a symbolistic, maybe abstract interpretation of Čapek's drama. Robots are closer to the principle of human self-destruction. And the last example or last sample from the collections of the theater department of the National Museum is also in line with that. It includes the collection of costume design of Jan Slade. I tried to find an example. I would say that the staging of Mr. Stanislav Vyskočil did not really deviate from the usual line of stage design. However, in terms of interpretation, it is a certain nut to crack. It is based on the morphology of the 1940s, 50s. The stage designer worked with elements of wooden and also board walls, logs, fences, ramps, and the stylization is almost impressionistic. Dvořák's stage also reminds us of conceptualism and arte povera, the art of the poor, and environmental topics. It is difficult to say whether this was the intention of the author's team or whether we see that from today's perspective. The stage space reminds us of a monumental bunker. And I would say that it is a result of circumstances that occurred. Maybe it wasn't a clear intention. Maybe the circumstances of that time had impact on it, circumstances after August 1968. So when you look at the photographs from the theater's archive, we think of that. To reach clear conclusions, it would be necessary to conduct heuristic research and also to listen to the contemporary witnesses. Maybe technical, technological of the future, which is not a near future, maybe extraterrestrials could be referred to. Or maybe something like in the movie Visitors. So I believe that this was a certain tendency to move forward. I believe that I have covered our topic. I wanted to show you some samples of the set designs that are included in the collections of our museum, and I would like to thank you for your attention. Libor, thank you so much. Thank you for all of the samples that you showed to us. Thank you both for introducing the history of stage design to us. You discussed the White Plague and also RUR stagings. And now we will move to the next topic, a topic that we have already mentioned. The topic is reflection of various designs of the White Plague. I'm very happy that I have the opportunity to welcome Markéta Fantová, who is the artistic director of Prague Quadriennale. And also we will hear a speaker from Canada who cooperates with Quadriennale. So the floor is yours. Now we are switching to English again.
results of our project. That's been quite a long project starting in the summer. I believe we started in June, July of last year. And the reason why we did this project as part of Quadrennial PQ Studio is because we thought that we need to help pedagogues around the world, students who are stuck at home and they're in front of their screens trying to learn, and perhaps they might need some kind of project that connects them across the globe. So those were the very first steps that we considered. And after that, we were trying to figure out what exactly we will be doing, what kind of a play we will choose. So Patrick, if you'd like to just introduce the beginnings where we started, and I'll try to start this presentation.
Sure, thank you. And thank you for inviting me to be part of this symposium. It's really an honor. Actually, I have to admit that it was Marketa who realized that the Prague Quadrennial really needed to respond to the crisis. If some of you remember that back in March of last year, this happened very suddenly, where everything around the world, particularly in North America and Europe, shut down around the same time. And and some countries even earlier, of course, Italy being hit hard right at the beginning. So, Marketa proposed that we relaunch this project that was a little bit of a surprise hit at the 2019 Prague Quadrennial. And that we do an online version, really to give students a chance to work towards something that had an opportunity for international connection. And really in light of the fact that so many student projects had been canceled, so many shows were not going to go forward. And as an educator here in Canada, I was really feeling the disappointment and the kind of the hopes were dashed of so many students back in March, and actually continue to be now. So we decided to relaunch an online version of the Common Design Project in cooperation with the ATI, and to celebrate the Karl Čapek's life and work. And this particular play, happens to be incredibly prescient. It predicts what is happening in our world now. Even though Čapek really intended it as a metaphor, we are actually living the metaphor right now. So it's quite a challenge. Or it was quite a challenge for our students around the world to respond to it in their way, in terms of what they were experiencing and the way they saw this metaphor playing out in real time around them and around the world.
And we heard already in the previous presentations how Čapek's visionary abilities to really foresee what may come, and even just mentioning the whole situation, mentioning China, that all the diseases are essentially coming from China. I think we are all shocked how precise some of these things that are happening right now around us and affecting us were already happening in the past, and what he has written actually has so much resonance in today's world. So we had various plays that we were considering right at the beginning, but Čapek, with his visionary writing, I think, and also the fact that his plays are translated into many languages, gave us hope that we'll be able to really get into our circle as many schools as possible. And somehow that has really happened. I believe that we had 50 participating schools, which is a fairly large number. We had lots of students, and Patrick and I, we spent some time with them and their professors in consultations. So we were also serving as pedagogues, partially part-time, I would say. And I have to say that all these dialogues and us talking with those students, that was so inspiring and wonderful. Those were really excellent imagination feeding times, learning from the young generation how they think about the play, how they see current world resonate within it, how they are working with the metaphor of Karel Čapek and his writing. And we've received an incredible diversity of results. So we'd like to share with you some of these. And also, actually, Patrick, maybe if we just cover, besides our conversations, of course, everything culminate. Yeah, what was the,
I'm also going to just attribute, you know, this project was actually started back in the idea of doing a common design project under quite a different format was started in 2003 by Pamela Howard. And so when we were working towards 2019 to revive the project, I had the pleasure of speaking to Pamela. And one of her most important pieces of advice was that the conversation is actually not going to happen organically, that it has to be really driven and organized. And I took that advice to heart. And so we assembled a really brilliant panel of diverse international designers and academics. We had Katrina Lindsay, who's an incredible designer from London. I guess one of her most recent projects was the Harry Potter musical in the West End. Julie Balzas from Hungary, whose work I first encountered at World Stage Design in Taipei, and Marketa has collaborated with her in the past on other projects. We got to know Dr. Dinesh Yadav from India, who's also a professor in Wisconsin in the USA, and Hassan, who's on the panel, a part of this conference today, was our sort of literary expert and dramaturgical advisor on the project. So the four of them together were able to give really diverse feedback to the students, asking them, you know, questions in particular about things they might not have thought of, asking them what they meant with some of their designs. So we'll talk about that more, I think, as we go through.
So here are just some examples, and I will not yet say what schools, what places, where they come from, but just so you can get a sense of what we encountered as we were receiving the results. Essentially, the goal was we had given them the play, we had consultations with them, and we asked the students that they create scenography that is show ready. Of course, we knew that there is no particular space. They had to figure out what space they would like to place the play in. And we had given them absolutely wide field of opportunities that they could choose either theater buildings, they could choose site-specific areas. They could really choose any kind of space that they were capable of mapping. So that was really important that they knew what they're using as a space. That already was a bit difficult with the COVID situation when nobody could actually get outside easily. Nevertheless, they fulfilled their goal really well. We asked that they do storyboard. For us, it was very important that we could see different dramatic situations throughout the play, how it evolves, and we really wanted to see how they solve the play situation from situation dramaturgically as well. And nothing tells us more than the storyboard. They also, some of them made models, some of them made videos, some of them created audio sound files that were also including sound solutions for the scenography. So they really looked at multi-sensorial solutions to this play. And some of them worked individually, some of them worked as groups in teams, and some of these teams were mixed and existed in different parts of the world. So they had to also get the communication going across rather big distances because they were separated by distance thanks to COVID. So this is speaking about the diversity of the results. And I will just go through the pictures.
Yeah, as Marketa goes through these pictures, I'll just add, just for clarity, we asked them specifically to do what we called a total production design. So what that means, it varies between countries. And we had discovered that in 2019, that in the Anglo-Saxon world and Western Europe, there is a pretty common definition of what that means. But when you start to go out further from that world, the definition really changes, and we wanted to be open to other definitions of what a total production design meant. But ultimately, we were looking for projects that demonstrated they had really thought through the whole text, and that the text had been the thing that they were jumping off from and being inspired by, as opposed to imposing something that didn't actually add dramaturgically to Capek's work.
And so here's we selected just a few to show a sample, and we are of course, but we are all inviting you to visit our gallery that has opened yesterday through a PQ website. So you're more than welcome to see all the selected works, which is 16 out of a larger body of works, and those will be also showing through PQ Studio Facebook page. So this is the first one that you will be able to see more of in the gallery. With this particular project that comes from Nottingham Trent University, and it's by Hardy Grew. What we really loved about this is the use of the metaphor. When we had a discussion with students from that school, they all were living in this highly poetic world of metaphors. But I remember talking to Hardy, and he just said, well, I just really think that I want all of my characters to be birds, because, birds, they can also spread the disease. And at that time I laughed, and I didn't know what to expect from him. And he really came up with quite a brilliant project. So we'll just let you watch the video that he submitted of the location and his scenography solution. So this should give you an idea of one of the projects that we received, and I hope that you heard the sound, because the sound was part of the sound design for the play as well. So I'm not sure, but I'm hoping. And here's another one.
Yeah, if not, I've put the gallery into the chat so that all of you have the web address and can look at all of these in more detail later today. Yeah, you know, that last presentation, you could see so many interesting things happening there in terms of the use of scale and the way that that designer took common objects like the bird spikes that you'd see on buildings where they're trying to keep pigeons away, and you know, make them into things that were larger than the people, sort of from the point of view of the birds. So this particular aspect of the play is very challenging for designers. That how does one represent the plague? How does one show the deterioration of the society and this disease, this white plague that is spreading? And we had so many different solutions to that particular question.
And in this case, it came through costumes. We're looking at Academy of Fine Arts in Warsaw. And this is their set. That was very complex, very, very complex. And throughout the time, the audience was seated around. So this is an entirely newly built space, because we also didn't give anybody a limit on the budget. So this is kind of just a conceptual idea. It is in 2 stories. It also deals with the societal levels. So the lower you get in the chain of the architecture, the lower you are within the society. But also the whole shape was throughout the time getting more and more smoky, misty, and hard to see through. So there is a development, which you can see at our gallery, that not only was it a projection surface, but also it was a surface that was getting more and more misty. So toward the end, the audience would have a really hard time seeing the lower portion of the space, but they would be seeing the top portion a lot clearer. So that was a very interesting conceptual approach, also very architectural. I'm sure that there would be some challenges technically, that's definite, but in terms of conceptual idea, it was really brilliant. Patrick, anything you want to add to this one? Because this was very interesting artistically as well.
Yes, I think, you know, one of the things that is worth pointing out is that we were really also trying to, with this project, celebrate the artistry and the craft that goes into communicating design ideas, really bringing that to the forefront. And so through these examples that we're showing you, and if you have a look in the gallery, you'll see that the approaches to communicating the ideas visually is really different from one school to another. Like Marketa mentioned, some made physical three-dimensional models in scale, and others, like here, worked with a combination of computer rendered space, and you can see the costumes were like a combination of collage and hand drawing and painting. So it's in a way a mixed media in the deepest sense of the word, to communicate these ideas, and that really helps to, I mean, I feel that in a way Marshall McLuhan's famous quote, "The medium is the message," is so important, and that the medium that the students chose to use speaks to the period in which we are facing, you know, in which we find ourselves. So often groups that were working, you know, for the same school, but were not able to be in the same city together or work in the same studio. For them, working in electronic medium was, really a way to accomplish a design that they wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. Whereas some of those who were able to make a physical model might have been in places of the world where the outbreak wasn't so severe at the time that they were working in, so that they were able to get together and work on the projects as a group.
Or there was also a difference between whether it was a larger group or a small group or an individual, because when it was an individual designer, they had they oftentimes expressed themselves through models. Here in this particular project, the drawing skills were just amazing, really quite incredible. This is yet another project, which is not unlike Sleep No More, which is essentially a project that takes over a whole building, and the viewer can walk and wander through different places. So here you see a diagram of what the designer actually envisioned as different rooms that people can go through. It does have a certain hierarchy. So there is a certain beginning, and you have to reach certain places in a certain time in order to put the story together. However, there are also many different spaces that you can navigate on your own in different times in order to put the story together. So this is somewhat non-linear immersive experience, if you will. You enter and you put the whole story together. This is the Escuela Nacional de Arte Teatral from Mexico, and Eric George was the designer, and this was an extensive work. Again, we'll just show you just a sample of what we received. It's a film. It's a video that is, again, as Patrick mentioned, it is based on digital media, and he's exactly right. The era we are in is really showing in the media quite strongly. So the way how we live now and what we're experiencing being online all the time, I think that also is mixing into our media as scenographers in a way that is actually quite interesting. And we're hopeful that there will be some interesting and positive developments out of this terrifying time. So this was just a sample. Again, a long video with sound files and pictures and maps are available on our in our gallery. So you can see more, and you can see how much time probably went into this particular project.
I'd like to add, Marketa, to this that young designer, Eric George. He really charmed all of us during his presentation, because and I always feel as an English speaker that it's such an honor to be invited to the Czech Republic, where that it's to connect with the international community. English at the moment seems to be the language that is used most often, and I actually do feel a bit badly about that, that we in a way penalize or penalize countries where English is not spoken as widely. And this particular designer from Mexico, he just solved all of that problem on his own. He got his own translator. He didn't find it to be an obstacle at all. And he really rose to the occasion of the project. So that was really one of those human moments, I think, during our critiques that impressed certainly Marketa and I and the panelists.
That's an excellent point to make, because we were trying to be open to all the countries and all the students. But what we're running into all the time is that English is the main language of PQ at the moment. We're trying to expand always when we're sending out some open calls. We're really trying to be as open about these things as possible. Nevertheless, the fallback on language is English. And I think there is something that is a language justice that I think we are going to be looking into more and more, and try to really help out and support people who see it sometimes as a complication trying to reach us and get into the project. So we are aware of that, and thank you, Patrick, for making that point, because I think it's becoming more and more important.
Well, I think the history of the Czech Republic in the 20th century allows Czech people to be very patient in terms of foreign languages, having had German, Russian, and now English as the various language of international discussion. I suppose French at one time, but you know, I think in a way that the Czech people can be an example to the world in terms of patience in that regard.
So moving to the next one, Northwestern University. This was interesting to us because this is on regular theater stage inside the theater, yet it's an industrial site. So what we saw a lot were industrial sites that were site specific, that students chose as their space for the White Plague. In this case, these students had chosen an actual industrial site, but they put it on stage. And something that we admired about this project is just craftsmanship of their model making, and in general, just the approach in terms of regular scenography on stage. So, and here were, oh, this is for the next project. So again, I mean, you can see their storyboard, where you can see the changes and developments of this stage. The lighting was definitely heavily involved in the changes. So this is something where they really thought through how to use their theater space to the maximum.
Yeah, and you know, this is one of the school. Marketa and I divided because there were, you know, in the end, I think we initially had 50 participants, and then we had consultations with about 35. Some chose not to do the consultations. So that was a huge, and you know, we spent an hour with each school doing those consultations. And so Marketa and I split up the list often by time zone. So this was one of the groups that I got to speak to because they're in North America, they're in Chicago. And these two, this is a team of 2 designers. They were so mature, and they took notes that were discussed in that session so seriously, and really took them on board and explored them. So when they brought their final project forward, it really did have a sense of maturity about it that we admired. And again, as Marketa mentioned, the craftsmanship in the model, and just celebrating that it's another skill set to put a set on stage, that there's another, it's another kind of skill set in addition to the many site-specific projects that we saw. The costume designs for that particular project are also remarkable. So have a look at them in the online gallery.
And so here, moving to the next one, these are some of the inspiration images. This is from Royal Welsh College of Music and Drama. And the designer, she chose a actual theater, but this is a theater that is in disrepair. So it's not really, essentially it's a theater, but it really is a site-specific project. So here you can see some of the images. She is using the space all the way across from one end to the other for various different scenes that are happening in different parts of the theater space in different locations, very much site-specific way. So we have 2 very contrasting projects, one that is using regular theater on stage and yet is putting an industrial setting there. And this is theater used as a site-specific space where there is setting put into all the parts of the spaces. This is the space she had chosen. And you can see that it is falling into disrepair. You can see on the left-hand side that the wall has some water damage there.
And the floor, it's been used as a gymnasium, so you can see the flooring has tape lines from some kind of game.
Right, so she has recreated a model for the whole space and broke it down into the scenes. Those you can again, so we're just giving you taste of bits and pieces. So again, you can see that in the gallery. She spent enormous amount of time building a model, building it in scale, including all the details, including the water damage on the wall. And then she put different kinds of scenes. And again, we're talking about this connection of digital media, drawing, model making all together into this one particular result. And the last but not least, as you all probably are aware of the situation in the United States, which is fortunately now much better. At the time when these students were working, they were deeply concerned about where their country is going. This is a project from Yale School of Drama, and the team there definitely got inspired by their current situation and everything what Vera Velemanova was saying in her presentation about the current danger, about the situation with technology and politics and totalitarian regimes that Čapek put into his play. All of that has resonated with those students, and all those fears appeared in their solution. So this was very, I think, honest reaction to the era and the political situation there. I think this is our last slide. Patrick, anything else you want to?
It is. I'll just mention that if we could go back one, Marketa, to the Royal Welsh College. One of the really interesting things about this designer's approach in terms of site specificity is that she was concerned about mounting this during COVID. So she was really taking social distancing and the potential regulation of how many audience you could have in a theater space to heart. And so she actually designed fake audience people. So mannequins mannequins that actually had a breathing apparatus inside of them. So if you were watching the performance, you would be sitting next to a mannequin that would actually, you would sense them breathing, and you might sense the breathing getting heavier and heavier as the play went through. So that was a really interesting aspect of her proposal. And then in terms of the Yale piece, what was interesting about this one too, not only the kind of monumental style and scale of this architecture they were proposing, but if you look at the costume designs, one of the things that I spoke to many of the groups about was the role of women in this play. And some designers chose to make Galen into a female doctor. There were a number of proposals that did that, but this one really took the oppressive position of women in this in Čapek's metaphor and tied it through costume to what you were seeing in the US in terms of the women that were around the former president and the kind of women that he had around him. So you can see these sort of short dresses, revealing forms, this kind of objectification that these students felt was part of a kind of a fascist regime.
And so with that, we would like to both welcome you to the gallery, which you can reach either like this, or you can go to the PQ website and you can just find it through there. It's also on the Facebook. It's everywhere throughout on our various different pages, so it's easy to find. It takes a bit of time, and I'm sure that you will spend a lot of, if you're interested, you will spend quite a bit of time listening to all the files, films, and videos. And so with that, we will I thank you for listening to us. Patrick, I'm sure you had a hard time waking up at 4 a.m., but thank you so much that you made it. It was great.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, Marketa and Patrick. It was great to see the results, because I was a bit following all the trajectory of the project, and I have to admit that it was an honor to establish this collaboration between our department, which is the organizer of the conference, and PQ, which is the organizer of this terrifying project. So it's it was really a pleasure to follow, and I have to take my time to go through the whole gallery. Thank you very much. Stay with us. Marketa will be the moderator of the last discussion, but we have still one contribution in our program, and it's my big pleasure to introduce Mrs. Veronika Ambros, professor of comparative literature and Slavic studies. And she will bring us back again into the interwar era and present Friedrich Kiesler's RUR.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me, and it's my great pleasure to be there. I don't know where to connect to my presentation.
Share the screen.
I share screen. I see it.
Screen, yeah.
And PowerPoint and Kiesler. Can you see it?
Yes, we can see it.
Yeah?
Yes.
But, okay, so I run it, slideshow.
From beginning?
Yeah, I'm trying.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I wanted, before I start, I wanted to say that I enjoyed all the other contributions I could see. It's very, very interesting for me. But for me, the impulse to deal with Kiesler was when Eva Stehlikova was watching my library and found a book by Lee Goldberg about performance art. And there was the picture of this one, which I'm going to show you again. Kiesler's set design to RUR, and we were both very intrigued by it. And then another tribute to Adolf Scherl, because I asked him, what do you know about Kiesler? And he looks at me and says, Fritz, of course, Chernošská pohádka. It's Emperor John's. So both of them actually inspired me to dig a little bit more into Kiesler. So I will try to move the presentation so that you see, there he is, Friedrich Kiesler. You don't see him because it's too big, I didn't know. No. So this is the picture of the performance in Berlin. And I will start, oh gosh, this one gave up on me. Okay, so my title is Karel Čapek's and Friedrich Kiesler's WUR, RUR, Verstands or Verstands on Universal Robots. I found grenzübergreifend, which means beyond and or across the borders, transnational, transmedia, across the genres as well. That was okay, so this is actually from Vienna and not from Prague. And the director is a different one. I start with Walter Benjamin. Mass movements, including war, constitute a form of human behavior, which particularly favors mechanical equipment. Directed by John Gotthoft, and you know him probably from Wegener's Golem. or a student of Prague, actually. Reinhardt's actor. Directed by John Gotthoff as VUR, Westerns, Universal Robots, utopistisches Kollektivdrama. The show took first place on March 29, 1923 at the Theatre am Kurfürstendamm, a month before its premiere in London, and it ran until 31st of May 23. Otto Pick's translation, and that's important, respected the original and the wish of the author, as it followed the Czech example and defamiliarized the German word Verstand, reason or mind or intellect, with a slight change of its spelling. Well informed about German and Czech theater, Pick, a bilingual author and translator, produced a text very close to Čapek's drama. He kept the punctuation of the original, including the dashes explored by Jan Mukařovský in his theoretical examination of the dialogue. They fragmented the utterances and might have underscored the impression of the mechanical equipment Benjamin was talking about, as well as the lack of individual expression. In Berlin, many elements of Čapek's drama, characters as types, collective and oratory style, resonated with the contemporary expressionist trend current on the German stage that might have overshadowed the originality of the play, at least judging by Herbert Hering's review, in which the leading critic of German theater at the time described Čapek as a lame epigon of Georg Kaiser. The apparatus is everything, the expression nothing. The apparatus to which Hering refers was Friedrich Kiesler's set design, set in motion by unprecedented multimedia or mixed media performance. I'm going to try to show you. If you look at this picture, you see that what he was using, and I'm going to talk about it. He was using film projections and what Lee Rosenberg is describing as television. But I will show you the pictures. The pictures are courtesy of Friedrich Kiesler's museum in Vienna. That's Kiesler, but that's the end. Huh? This is the Feuerstein, and you see that there are certain similarities. This is one of the images. There are 5 images altogether, I think, available. Kiesler describes his experience with the performance as an occasion to use for the first time in a theater a motion picture. A small cinema projection was also incorporated in the set, instead of a painted backdrop, and also television, in the sense that Kiesler speaks, that I had a big square panel window in the middle of the stage drop. Here and here. And also, which could be opened by remote control. When the director of the human factory in the play pushed a button at his desk, the panel opened and the audience saw 2 human beings, 1.5 feet tall, casually moving and talking, heard through a hidden loudspeaker. It was quite an illusion, because a minute later you saw the same actors appear on stage full size. There was inevitably a burst of applause at this moment. I mention it because these new devices to present the interplay of reality and illusion brought many artists to the theater. It was the artists of the group The Style, Piet Mondrian and his friends, and that actually attracted them to Kiesler and to his performance, and we will hear about it. Television was at the time still in experimental stages of development, and Kiesler's use of it as a method to displace actors' bodies from the stage and project them onto a screen reflected a growing public fascination with the potentials of this new technology. What Kiesler calls an illusion was a result of a complex effort to let the backdrop explode. That's a quote by Barbara Lessac. By foregrounding the fictionality of the as-if world, they are breaking the illusion of a depicted mimetic reality. Only little is preserved about the production. The existing pictures, however, are reminiscent of Chaplin's Modern Times and Fritz Lang's Metropolis, both produced much later, while concurrent with Meyerhold and Eisenstein's experiments with the film on stage, and preceding Erwin Piscator's and Burian's stage collages, and Alfred Radok's Magic Lantern as another combination of live and filmed action. Although film projections on stage often served different purposes, illustrations, decoration, commentary, etc., it always disrupted the unity and continuum of space and time on stage. Besides, Kiesler's groundbreaking staging it also dislocated the unity of the characters by using the device known from fairgrounds called tanagra, thus crossing the border between art and popular culture, typical of the avant-garde. Tanagra theaters existed in many European cities in the years 1910-1920. The name comes from the figures excavated at Tanagra in the 1890s, whose name became synonymous with perfect living miniatures, particularly females. The sideshow illusion consisted of a miniature stage where living actors appeared as real but tiny figures through an arrangement of plane and concave mirrors. Its development as a sideshow attraction came about as a byproduct of research into optical instruments that could better sustain the perception of death. Kiesler employed among the many visual and acoustic signs the diminished mirror images of Tanagra as an aperture reminiscent of a TV monitor. The miniatures that appeared later as live actors foregrounded the transformation through two different types of acting, either in front of an apparatus or a live audience. What Čapek expressed through the dialogue, Kiesler translated into another semiotic system by using visual means and the difference between the two-dimensional and three-dimensional actor figures. The miniatures appeared like puppets and doubles of the life-size actors, thus emphasizing the affinity and the fluid transition between both. Although Tanagra, as Springer asserts, could have been perceived only by a limited number of the audience, it might have been a part of Kiesler's strategy for the audience. RUR would be, and I'm quoting Graham, RUR would be his first opportunity to test a set of ideas about spectatorial psychology and the incorporation of media technologies into the theatrical arena, themes that would resonate through the following decades of his work. Tanagra also conjures the effect of the two sets of thoughts, one concerning visceral responses to the miniature in itself, and the other concerning responses to the prospect of other simulations, simultaneous realities, with the oscillation of both and, in contrast to either or neither nor. This observation corresponds with Čapek's paratectic ordering of different types of truths that challenges the spectator's imagination and intellect, This lodges a well-defined division between utopia and dystopia, work as drudgery and pleasure, in short, the binary ideas of divergences. It also coincides with Kiesler's emotive transfer from the stage to the audience, grounded in recent findings in experimental psychology, making the modern theater itself supplemented by new media technologies, the unique scene of new forms of collective experience. Kiesler turned the stage into a dynamic alternative to a static space. If you look at the image, the image, how it moves, and this is from the side, and this was the simultaneity you can see then in these images, because you can see how simultaneously they were projected. So Kiesler turned the stage into a dynamic alternative to a static space, with people moving inside a delimited area using electromechanical set as a huge montage compiled from the most diverse apparatuses and machine parts: megaphone, seismograph, tanagraph, iris diagram, light bulbs. By suggesting a fictional world in motion, Kiesler laid bare the complexity of the text. As Feuerstein, he too eliminated the traditionally fixed backdrop and juxtaposed the dystopia of the future with a colorful theatrical space. It's a quote by Kiesler. Hansel mentions, Jindřich Hansel, the Czech director and theorist. Hansel mentions Kiesler when he speaks about a spatial theater where optical action rests in the movements of surfaces, among which a single hero, a human being, struggles. Rather than a single creature, the robots, however, are initially a uniform collective, and the audience is confronted with the puppet-like, lonely figure of a human at the end of the play. This is from the production, and you can see the puppet-like, you can see the numbers, and this is Alquist. Hansel comments on Kiesler's use of diverse technology. In addition to Tanagra and the projected film, also mirrors and lights. As a result, and I quote, the stage is not a picture, because the theatricality is in happening, dění, in becoming, stávání. Mohoj Nať, who speaks about abstract objects which are used because they are transparent, showing the changes happening inside. Feuerstein applied a similar strategy when he used a glass door to create an imaginary space to make the audience aware of the performance dissection without directly showing the surgery Damon was subjected to. According to Graham, RUR is a heady amalgam of science, industry, politics, and culture, sometimes whimsical, sometimes didactic, displayed Čapek's unease with the modernist rhetoric of technological emancipation, widespread in the avant-garde of the interwar periods. Furthermore, Graham, who is among the very few analyzing Kiesler concerning the dramatic text notes, the pairing of designer and playwright proved to be a conceptually productive one. The collectivist mandate of Čapek's robots found a sympathetic parallel in Kiesler's belief that in the theater, each spectator must lose his individuality in order to be fused into a complete unity with the actors, offering one starting point from which to consider this moment of exchange between literature and design, each evincing a psychologically materialist exploration of modern subjectivity. Another part of Kiesler's design is the circular opening, which is evocative of Steiner round window. But in Kiesler's arrangement, it produces another dynamic element because it opens like an eye to capture an image similar to a spectre, especially when, for safety reason, it was projected on a stream of water. Correspondingly, the sound coming from the loudspeakers had also a distorted quality, supporting the oniric effect. This is congruent with an explosion in popularity of magic as a theatrical entertainment in the 19th century, and this fascination with spatial transformation is still being worked through in the spatial disciplines of 21st centuries. The performance in Berlin demonstrates the difficulties to find an appropriate category to capture the essence of the play. As Ehering, Graham too attempts to characterize the text, he, however, used the category of science fiction, which appears somewhat ahistorical and reductive, and he questions it when problematizing the established equation between robot and machine. Perhaps prompted by Čapek's biblical associations, he considers the play an allegory, while Pringle's simultaneous realities seem to be better suited for Kiesler's design and Čapek's text. Graham suggests that the science of work and the science of aesthetic perception found a meeting point in the arena of design and theater in the 1920s. Kiesler, as Čapek, did not conjure the fictional world of the future, but conceptualized the possible effects of the dynamic, malleable world of the present. Admittedly, there is an irony inherent in the fact that a play that introduced the term robot and was highly critical of the mechanical world had a stage set which celebrated just such possibilities. But in the hindsight, abolishing the automatized dichotomy and directing to multiple points of view, Kiesler and Čapek turned the stage into a preparatory school for unborn intellect. That's a quote by Adolf Loos, who actually Kiesler was collaborating with before. And that's another collaboration with Fernand Léger for Ballet Mécanique. And this is the mechanical robot, 1928, at the exhibition in London. He was supposed to replace Edward the King. Both Čapek and Kiesler created a modern multimedia theater and prepared the ground for artificial intelligence on stage. Now, I will sum it up by using Jan Mukařovský and his quote from an article in 1945. We have freed the concept of stage from its being limited to architecture, and we can also free the concept of actor from the limitation that regards the actor as a human being who represents a character. If the only thing that matters is the representation of the character by something else, then not only can a person be an actor, but also a figure of a word for puppet, machine. And he uses Lisitsky, Schlemmer, and Kiesler as examples. Or a thing, for example, the theater advertising of Belgian purchasing cooperatives. But once Zich, Otakar Zich, the Czech theorist, has relieved us from of the limitation that restricted the stage to architecture, then all the other elements of the theater performance jostle their way forward to freedom. The character, therefore closely associated with the human actor, is liberated. The playwright's message hitherto devoid is liberated. Other devices are liberated. Much to our amazement, we discovered that the stage space need not always be a space, but the sound can be a stage, music can be an event, scenery can be a message. Mukashovsky's quote point to another important aspect of the discussed performance. Analyzed by Honsel and Mukashovsky, it inspired a new tendency in theater theory, open to the complexity of a stage across media, genres, and nations. Thank you for your attention. Děkuji za pozornost.
Také děkujeme a já bych chtěla ještě dodat a zeptat se všech prezentujících, jestli mají ještě cokoliv, co by chtěli dodat, co vlastně třeba nestihli říct, anebo jestli mají dotazy vzájemně ke svým prezentacím. A možná, když už tady máme paní Ambros, tak bych začala s ní, jestli má ještě něco, co bych chtěla dodat. Well, I will also switch to English because this is going to be an interesting discussion. We have two different languages. We have English and Czech, and we have different participants. So what I'm asking is if any of the participants, any of the presenters has any question that or anything to add to their presentation after they saw other people's presentation, and they would like to add anything now since they've seen everybody else's presentation. And I wanted to start with Mrs. Ambros, since we have her right here.
Oh my God, I don't know where would I start and where I would end. So I think it's a wonderful forum, and I was very grateful for your presentation, because it was so interesting to see the students' production of the white. I would say sickness or illness, not plague, because that's not what Čapek did. But that's my. I don't know. Do you have questions? Did I talk too fast?
I'm trying to see if there are any questions. Let's just, since we have you, let's open the floor to a discussion, and let's see if anybody else has a question. Please do write at questions and answers if you have any question to actually do any of our presenters. Prosím, pošlete otázky, jestli máte jakékoliv otázky, my je přečteme a pokusíme se je.
If you have any questions, please.
Before anybody reacts to this, I'm just so grateful that you said this about white plague, that we should be calling it disease. We had this discussion with Hassan, and I'm sure Hassan is here as well, and he can probably add to that, because we had a long discussion in the beginning with students about this. How do we call it, whether it's going to be a white disease or a white plague? What's the difference? What does it mean? And students had taken it on their own way, and sometimes they invented their own way of understanding the whole thing. And quite often it had taken on the actual it was taken on by the actual situation now and the pandemics. So for them, it became really the pandemic that is current. And I am getting some.
No, there is no English edition which was called disease. All of them, most of them were called plague, or in England, the power and the glory, but it was dedicated to the theater name. So it was a free name. And the third name in English was used as a scourge. And I knew that Norma Comrade, American translator, unfortunately, she died this year by COVID because she was supposed to be with us. She was really against disease because she tried somehow to explain me the disease. It's not a correct word in English, but luckily in Anglo-Saxon world, nobody uses disease that much. Most of Czech translation use this, but nemoc, or this Čapek word in Czech language, also has varieties. Čapek was really specialist to give a title and made many problems to translator, not just with this name, but with the case Macropoulos. The whole play, it's about case, the trial, and everybody talks about affair, about long life, but actually it's about case, etc., etc. So he was expert with the names, and if you just compare the Chapek titles, it can be a book just translating those names. Yes.
The problem is also, no one mentioned it, that's why I mentioned it, is our approach to translation.
Yes.
In the 20s, the approach to translations was much looser than we are much more exact in approaching the work than or the text than we were before. That's why I try to stress PIC, because if you look at PIC's translation of RUR, it's really following Chapek's instructions, where Silver is all over the place, and we don't have to talk about him, but he also is behind the white plague. And I think illness would be probably better, sickness, than the plague, because that's already an interpretation, whereas Nemots is neutral.
Yeah. Yeah, you are true, but I think also the German's translation and the title it's wrong, because RUR, I know W, it's considering the Rosums, but Čapek didn't put the translation into Czech language. Under RUR, it's
Right.
obvious that abbreviation, it's an English abbreviation, so it's not a Czech one. So I also think the German's translation is wrong. That's my theory.
Hassan, it might be a wrong or right, but it's different.
I think this is...
You're right, I think.
This is actually a wonderful discussion about translations, because we ran into this as well. We were having incredibly hard time finding the right translation to give to all the students. Particularly, we also had students from different languages than just English or Czech. And we were battling this situation. What translation is more precise? Which one is not precise? And I'm sonographer by trade, so I'm not a linguist and I'm not a translator, so I wouldn't know which one to choose. But that's an interesting find for me, that some were really, really loose in the past, and that it's actually getting more precise. So the more current ones are actually better to have. But then we're dealing with rights, and we're right back to where we started.
Yeah.
So that was, well, thank you about the... Sorry, I just wanted to thank you for the translation part, because that's really important to bring up.
Yeah.
So we have a question here that arrived, and that's really, actually, that's to us, Patrick. That's among the proposals and projects received, where there are set design perceptions on the health units, hospitals, clinics, etc. I'm interested if there was a reflection on the sonography effect of the pandemics on health units, and maybe even the opposition between public and private ones. For example, the one managed by Sigelius, and others. Thank you. So, Patrick, do you want to take this one on if you're still there?
Sure. And then I'm sure you have something to add. That I think what I certainly noticed is that many, there are, because in the play there are scenes that take place in the clinic, and so many of the proposals involve some kind of solution to what in the world that they're proposing a hospital looks like. A lot of them sort of took inspiration from the images we saw of overflowing medical facilities in containers. The one proposal, the Yale University had containers that came on stage as medical units. Others had you had proposals where the audience had to walk through essentially hundreds of medical beds on their way to where they were going to sit. So there was really a variety of proposals as to how the students imagined a hospital looking, during the imaginary time of the White Plague.
And I think this was one of the most, the scariest part of some of the projects, because some of the students, well, there were some that were using it metaphorically and they would seed the audience in the hospital bed. So that was one of the projects that I remember. But there was also a project that we didn't select to the main gallery, but that definitely shook us a little bit with Patrick, in terms of how they were solving the lives that are being lost. They had a panel on the sides of the room with the audience. Everything was also safely distanced, so the stage and everything was in a sort of safely distanced, and worked through some projections as well. But there were panels around the walls for all of the audience members to see, with names and faces. And throughout the play, these names and faces were disappearing and were turning into the just blending into the black background. And those were people who were dying throughout in the time of the play. So that there were some things that were definitely reflecting the current situation in a very dark manner. So some of our discussions were quite depressing because of all the medical facilities. And I think that the other part of the question is dealing with the society and how the society is divided currently in terms of the ones who have and the ones who don't have. That definitely has shown in some of the solutions, particularly in the Warsaw solution that you could look at, where it was literally divided into floors. And there were some other projects that ended up not even sending us the results, where it was divided in such a way that the audience would have to go through underground site-specific spaces in order to reach the stage through the lepers. So yes, I think there were many different ways of looking at both hospitals and facilities, as well as the levels of a society.
And the guy from Mexico, he was really into many spaces, and
he even added a chapel, which I think was the first one. So it wasn't necessarily about medical facilities, but he ended up adding a spiritual place, which had no other purpose than for anybody who's moving through the space just to reflect upon themselves, which I thought was a very original and really, really nice part of the solution we didn't see in any other of the solutions. So that was interesting. I was just interested also so I have a question. I have a question to Mrs. Velemanová. Na paní Velemanovou mám otázku. Mě by strašně zajímalo, vy jste tam
Well, I'd
vyslovila...
like to ask you, Ms. Belemanova, because you touched upon a number of things which we then saw in our students' proposals, and that was the fear of technologies. And now we could see how students have to actually use technologies when working. So I would like to ask you whether you do think that it is horrible for you to see that we have to work with technologies. Well, horrible, you used the word, and I would say that it is ambivalent. On the one hand, it is horrible because this is the only way how we can meet each other. On the other hand, it is great and splendid that we can meet using technologies. And this is what I have to reflect upon, that we always have those two extreme cases which we have to reconcile. And this is what Čapek already recognized. Those are things which are historically known, have been known. And I think human being will always have this perception, will always have to grapple with the things. But what is important is to actually rise up to the challenge so that it's not a situation where dehumanization prevails. We do not want to have such a situation. Sometimes I think that this current situation where we only are allowed to meet this way, this actually sparks the urge in me to want to meet people, to go out. Although I'm rather an introverted person, somebody who would rather stay home and do my work. But now I want to meet people. So I do hope, I want to be very optimistic. I do hope that we will be able to actually balance things. Let me ask you another thing.
Jak jste vlastně mluvila o té Číně, vy jste se
You
zmínila o tom,
spoke about China. You mentioned it in your quote. You mentioned China there. You also mentioned that actually illnesses come from China. Our students got shocked reading that Čapek wrote something that 100 years ago. And this is what we discussed with Hassan so much, and with others we discussed it too. So what is your take on it? Why did he write it? Why did Čapek write it? What do you think? Why did he choose to write it in his play? Well, Čapek was a very educated, well-read person. He was surrounded by literati, by educated persons. And he knew well that in a moment when humanity multiplies beyond the reasonable, when we reach the moment when the planet is too small for us, then it might materialize. And what I think is that he might have found the inspiration in his own reading. I was also caught by surprise when reading about it in the White Plague. On the other hand, I was surprised that he was so specific in actually calling it a disease coming from China. At the same time, I do think that he might have understood it as a metaphor. When humanity actually multiplies too much, then there will be actually negative factors coming into fore. Thank you. For us, it was a very interesting and surprising moment. We had so much to discuss, including political correctness and other developments of the current situation or society. Yeah. Oh, Hassan could actually comment on it, how he would actually explain that to our international students or participants. We touched upon other Čapek's work. He was a journalist, don't forget about that, and he knew what was happening in other parts of the world. And he was also very close to the Czechoslovak president, Masaryk. And they philosophized about modern society and its possible decline, and it must have been a topic discussed between him and probably the president, and we were discussing it yesterday in the sense whether this was part of the scientific societal dialogue, or to which degree this was just a science fiction feature. Well, What I think is that Čapek was a visionary. We actually have been reinventing Čapek every decade. First, we actually focused on the war with the newts because we had the wave of migrants. Now we focus on the robots. Now we focus on the white plague. So we also have such social elements as drug abuse, prostitution, human trafficking, etc. And Čapek was able to say what is good, what is actually evil. And yesterday I listened to the presentation from Munich, and there was one actor playing the Marshal and Dr. Galen in London. And Čapek was saying, this is not my play. Čapek did not want to actually ascribe the situation to any specific country. That's why he was talking about Lilienthal's clinic, and also he was very abstract in the other geographical names. What makes me happy is that Czechs have moved forward. That means that the Čapek's work is now working in the contemporary society. And thanks to COVID, finally became completely different. Well, this is ironically a positive take on COVID. And I think that we will have some inspiration, no doubt, based on the critical discussion. But we do not have so much time. That's why I would like to give the floor to Martina. Well, maybe we should actually answer one more question, or rather a comment. It says a comment from a speaker. Can you see the? Yes.
Can we trust him? It's a fiction, so it's up to the interpretation who interprets that. So if the theater interpretation is gain, yeah, okay, maybe.
Ano, ano.
Můžete.
Já jsem, můžu?
Well, if I may, I will try to say something about it. Who says that? That is the character of Professor Sigelius. Professor Sigelius says this because he says to Galen, this origin of yours, this is labeling. And this is very typical of Professor Sigelius.
I think there is another question, or yeah, it's for Marketa, maybe, I think this question is dedicated to maybe Martina. Will be the conference online?
No other comment to this last panel, and so it's the last call for comments or remarks.
Somebody asked about the conference, if the conference is going to
say something about it but yeah. So if there are no further comments, Maybe Hassan, I will ask you to say some final remarks to the whole conference, and then I will close it formally.
As I said for a few times, I'm so glad that after 100 years of RUR, of the great drama by Karol Čapek, maybe more greater by its idea than the plot nowadays. We dedicated this all conference, this meeting, many lecturing, and I'm so glad that we made it and that we did it, and I think we really succeeded. And also lots of lecturing were referring to white plague. Why I'm telling that, the second part is also that we are planning to publish the huge monography, not just by all presentation that we heard during those 2 days, but there are also a few people who couldn't have a speech. Why I'm telling that, the reason is also the maybe the only international monography. It's in Czech language from 89. It's from the year of the revolution in the Czech Republic. There are a few more from Hradec Králové from 19th, but this is, I could say, more international. So I'm also glad that somehow we gathered together and we made it. And I hope it's not the last conference dedicated to Karol Čapek and his great ideas. And thank you so much for all your researches, which were very professional. And I think all of us who are interested in his work, in theater work, found at least a bit professionality and lecturing to each of us for ourselves.
So, and I will continue with the answer to the last question of our conference. We recorded this conference for further research, and especially for those who will be the authors of our publication. So if someone is interested in getting some parts of the conference for further research, we will provide it, but it won't be published, and it won't be accessible on public domains. But of course, we will further continue in this collaboration with all of the panelists and some other researchers who will contribute to the publication. The conference was called The Days After, and it has started exactly 1 day after the first opening of RUR in the National Theatre in Prague. But the days of the conference are not over, because this work and this pleasure to prepare and edit the publication is our near future. As Hassan already announced, it will be published in our current lingua franca, it means in English, and I hope strongly that when it's launched and we foresee to have it in early autumn, I strongly hope that it will be time of post-pandemic period, and maybe we will be able to meet again live, and hopefully we can have some launch as a live event and a live gathering and celebration of this common work. I would like to thank to all the panelists who took part in our conference. I would like also to thank to all our attendees. And once again, many thanks also to our partners. The organizer of this conference was the Arts and Theatre Institute, the Department of International Cooperation. I would like to ask Barbara Komel to appear because she was behind the scenes, but she did this big part of the whole coordination and organization job. So Barbara, many thanks to all your communication and technical excellence during this conference.
It was a pleasure.
Our department is here to promote Czech performing arts, but not only that, it's our pleasure to connect people from all parts of the world to communicate about important topics in current performing arts and human civilization, which was exactly this conference. And I hope that this was valid for all of you. Many thanks to the Prague Quadrennial. Many thanks to Czech centers who were also partner of the conference, mainly in the communication part. And many thanks to the Čapek Brothers Society and Silesian University, other partners of the conference. Thank you very much. That's the very end of the conference, and goodbye. Have a great evening and stay optimistic and stay healthy.
Goodbye. Nashledanou.
Děkujeme, nashledanou. Thank you.
Děkuju.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for organizing it and for inviting me.
Děkuju, nashledanou.
Nashledanou.
Nashledanou.